That's okay. That photo up on the screen is one of my favorite photos of urban agriculture. If you're not familiar, that's the skyline of Cleveland. And you can't see the river beyond that farm there, but you can see the train bridge over the Cuyahoga River. And we all know what the Cuyahoga River was most famous for. And I think it's really cool that on the banks of, that terrible ecological disaster, environmental disaster, that we have what was once the largest urban farm in the United States growing nutritious food for folks in Cleveland. I don't think we can say that's the largest farm in the United States, any urban farm, because we've had so many come online recently in the past years. It is probably still the largest urban farm in the state of Ohio, however. So a couple of caveats. I think it's important to understand the context about urban agriculture. A lot of folks think the idea of urban areas and farming are, opposite ends of the spectrum and really don't occur in the same place. And really, if you think about it, the whole idea of urban areas and farming probably came about at the same time, about 10,000 years ago in what is now modern day Persia, as man moved away from being hunter-gatherers and started tending crops to feed themselves. More people were able to be fed. And as more people joined the community, they grew more food. And as they grew more food, more people joined the community. And so the whole idea of urban areas and people living together, communities, and farming, agriculture probably grew together historically. Traditionally, some countries outside the United States have historically produced a lot of food in urban areas. Cuba is a good example of a country like that. Many countries in Asia to this day produce a lot of food in urban areas. I was on a study tour in China for Urban Ag a few years ago, and China builds new cities and plans new cities. And when they do, they incorporate agriculture and farming right in that city plan and right in the downtown urban core, not outside what we would say the Beltway here in Columbus. The United Nations Food and Ag Organization estimates that some 800 million people worldwide produce food in some city. And here in the United States, estimates are that about 15% of all food in the United States is produced in a metropolitan area. Now, that may not be the core urban neighborhoods. When you think about the Columbus metropolitan area, it includes all the ring counties around Columbus, which are fairly large agricultural counties. But I think it's important to note that we do produce food close to cities in metropolitan areas in the United States. So what do we mean by urban agriculture? Urban agriculture, we take kind of a big tent view at OSU of what urban agriculture is. We think it includes people growing food in their home garden. Some people plant their entire lot and call it a garden. It includes community gardens. If you're not familiar with community gardens, that's where people have a plot. A lot of people garden together. They have their own plot and they produce food mostly for themselves or their family. It's hard to quantify the impact of community gardens, but a couple of years ago, the city of Philadelphia collected data on how much fruits and vegetables and herbs were produced in just their community gardens. And they found that it was over 2 million pounds just in the city of Philadelphia. It was worth $4 million. So obviously community gardens are an important part of urban agriculture. And then the part of urban agriculture that's growing the most, both here in Columbus and Ohio and in several urban areas throughout the country, is urban farms, people growing food for others in an urban environment. And there's lots of models for doing this. Some people do it as for-profit businesses. A lot are models include social enterprises where they produce food to address some need in the community, in a neighborhood, typically around food insecurity, and sometimes it's around other economic issues and poverty. And then some specialty enterprises, things like aquaponics, growing fish, and plants in the same system, aquaculture, growing fish, and greenhouses. So all those things kind of make up urban agriculture in addition to urban farming that I mentioned. Just some pictures of what, I like to say it comes in all shapes and sizes. You can see the lower photo there on your left is a typical community garden, and the other photos are folks that are growing food at their homes and in their yards. It's not one in advance anymore. The next photos kind of photos of some urban farms here in Columbus. This is really growing in Columbus and throughout Ohio. About 7 or 8 years ago, we had about 5 urban farms in the city of Columbus. Last summer, we had about 37 urban farms. And so the trajectory of growth has been fairly steep in the last few years. There we go, it's working again. So there's some photos of what some urban farms look like. Certainly very different than more traditional conventional farms in more rural area. So what are the trends contributing to the growth of urban ag? One of the biggest ones is population shifts and what I call the new urbanism. Since 2010, census data shows that population is up in metropolitan areas by 6%. At the same time, it's declined by 0.5% in non-metropolitan areas. And folks that are moving to metropolitan areas, a lot of them are moving to core urban neighborhoods, not just other parts of the metropolitan area. And then what I mean by new urbanism is just in the last 10 or 15 years, a lot of people have really recognized that there's quality of life value to living in urban areas and are making conscious decisions to move to a more urban environment. Still not working, Joe. Some other factors are things like vacant land in post-industrial cities. Columbus is not a great example of a post-industrial city. We don't have this track record of having a lot of history of industry. Cleveland is, Toledo is, Detroit, Michigan is like the poster child for having lots and lots of vacant land. And one use that folks are coming up with is producing food on this vacant land. Food insecurity is certainly driving it. Food insecurity is defined as whether or not families have enough food to live a healthy and nutritious lifestyle for all family members for the entire month. And food insecurity is tied very closely to poverty. And so we have a lot of high rates of poverty in urban neighborhoods in many cities, including here in Columbus. And so this is driving some folks to produce food closer to where those populations are. And then food access is also a driver of urban agriculture and urban farming. And the best way I know to describe food access, which is very different than food insecurity, is to ask you, where do you shop for food? If you're like me, you probably shop at something that looks like one of these pictures up on the screen. Unfortunately, in some of our urban neighborhoods are food deserts where they do not have full service grocery stores that have fresh fruits, vegetables, unprocessed food. And these are the types of places that up on the screen that many folks that live in food deserts in urban areas have to shop for food. Those photos were taken very close to here in the University District in the Wineland Park neighborhood. Those same neighborhoods tend to be what we call food swamps, where we have a real high concentration of fast food restaurants. Nothing wrong with fast food restaurants, obviously, but the problem is if that's the only source of food along with the carryouts and corner stores, it's a recipe for unhealthy living for residents. And then even when we do have don't have a food desert, that we have a full service grocery in the neighborhood, there could be other access issues, barriers to access. This photo here is a photo taken a few years ago of the new Kroger store that was built on High Street and King there at the very edge of Wineland Park and where the short north starts. When they built this new grocery store, we were doing a local foods project in the neighborhood. We had been doing focus groups with folks who live in the neighborhood to ask them where they shop for food. And they basically told us those carryouts that I showed you on a couple slides ago. Well, this store was, the old Kroger was knocked down. It was not a nice store. Didn't have a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. Had lots of, damaged fruits and vegetables, fruit flies hovering around. Not a place that most of us would like to shop at. So Kroger decided to build a new store. They finished it just about the time we were finishing this local foods project. And so our last focus groups, we were asking folks, how many of you are now shopping at the new Krogers? And what we found to our dismay is very few people were. And so we started digging deeper and asked them, well, why not? And what we found was there were other barriers. Folks told us they had 4 and 5 kids they were raising in a single parent household, and they couldn't walk 6 or 7 blocks to the store. And if they could, they asked, how do I carry back gallons of milk or sacks of potatoes? We also found that something like 3/4 of all the residents in this census tract didn't own an automobile, so they depended on public transportation. So the point I'm trying to make is, even if we have sources of healthy food in the neighborhood, there may be other barriers. Just because we put a farmer's market in an underserved neighborhood, if folks can't afford the fruits and vegetables at the farmer's market, that's a food access problem. Some other trends contributing to the growth of urban ag, the whole idea of locavores, people that will do anything they can to eat locally. We see tremendous growth of consumer-supported agriculture, especially in urban areas lately, just explosive growth of farmers market all over the country, and then lots of institutional buying by schools, by restaurants, corporations, caterers, buying directly from farmers. And farmers, especially here in Ohio, have a great interest in selling directly to consumers. Why do you think that might be? Anybody? Why would farmers want to skip the middleman and go right to the end user, the consumer, and sell to the consumer?
Make more
They
money.
do make more money. For every dollar that we spend in the grocery store, farmers get about 16 cents. Okay, that varies by commodity, but about 16 cents actually goes to producers. When farmers sell in a direct marketing channel, like a CSA, like a farmer's market, they keep up to 95 cents of every dollar that you and I might spend on food. So obviously it's great. It's a win-win for the farmer and for consumers. Some other trends, the whole idea of foodie culture, people are really identifying other values besides nutrition in food. People want to know where food comes from. They want to shake the hand of the person who produced their food. That's really what's driving the growth of farmers market. People really like meeting the farmer, the farm family, and understanding the story behind that food production. Concerns related to obesity and inactivity, consuming less fresh fruits and vegetables, more unprocessed food is really driving this, because fruits and vegetables, high value fruits and vegetables, is really what urban farmers grow. They don't grow livestock, they don't grow grains, they don't grow corn, things like that. Food waste concerns and food safety concerns also are driving some of the growth of urban agriculture. So that's the drivers. What are some of the benefits? Why do people get into it? Obviously, done right, I think food security and food access can increase in a neighborhood when we develop urban ag enterprises. I like to say that they create an oasis in a food desert and an island in food swamps. I think it can promote physical activity and reduce the obesity rate, particularly if we involve children very early in life. Some other benefits, urban ag can provide additional green space. Some of those benefits include things like reducing the urban heat island effect, sequestering additional carbon in the soil, and reducing stormwater runoff. I don't think I need to explain the benefits of that to those of you here. Some other benefits, urban ag provides us a place where we can recycle organic waste, keep it out of the landfill, recycle nutrients, and reduce some synthetic fertilizer and pesticide use. Most folks that are growing in urban environments grow organically, even if they're not certified organic, and they don't use synthetic inputs except when they have to. It can also reduce insect breeding areas when we take those city lots that are vacant and grown up in weeds and trash, and we convert them into productive food production sites. Urban ag can also promote a sense of community. Research has shown it decreases crime in neighborhoods where urban farms, where community gardens are located. Researchers have collected data on crime rates before those things located in the neighborhood and afterwards, and really shows that we can decrease crime in neighborhoods that have urban gardens and urban farms. Also raises property values. Cleveland, on the east side of Cleveland, has great data from the Great Recession to show that turning over properties from the land bank to folks to develop gardens and farms raised property values almost immediately. It can also reduce the cost of community services. If communities don't have to have properties in the land bank, they don't have to mow them, they don't have to keep them on the hire people to take care of them. That cuts down on the cost of community service. Some other benefits, I mentioned it repurposes vacant land. It provides jobs and can improve the economy. It doesn't provide a lot of jobs, I will say that, but agriculture in the whole is not very job intensive. Even more conventional farming in more rural areas is not very job intensive. And that's why economic professionals typically don't target agriculture as an economic development tool. But the thing I like about urban ag as an economic development tool is it develops different jobs. It develops businesses that people own. People become entrepreneurs. They're not clocking in and out at Dollar General or Walmart or McDonald's or something like that. And they typically go on to start other businesses. They may add value to the products that they produce and sell value added items. It can also be a source of vocational training for a specific audience, particularly folks that attend sheltered workshops or developmental delay schools. Cleveland has a great program called Cleveland Crops, where they have indoor greenhouses and high tunnels, and they teach folks with developmental disabilities job skills, life skills. They produce food, local food, nutritious food that's sold and marketed in the neighborhood, and those students also earn a wage doing that. Some other benefits, there's this human and community dimension. I think it reconnects people to their neighbors. An example of that, on the south side of Columbus here, one of our newer urban farms is on 3 land bank lots in a row, and she's been farming for a couple of years, doing a great job. And last year, someone came over and introduced themselves and told the farmer that I bought this house next door overlooking your urban farm. And the reason why we bought this house is we thought it was really cool that we could live, right next to this urban farm, and live in a neighborhood where nutritious food was being produced. So even if folks aren't involved as urban gardeners, if they just live next to or near or actually can see, they kind of gets people reconnected with their neighbors and their neighborhood. I think it reconnects urban residents to nature and cycles the environment. If we need people to understand, the big societal problems related to resource depletion and climate change and environmental degradation, what better way than to have people involved with growing food or gardening, or at least seeing that happen in the built environment. There are some barriers to the growth of urban agriculture. Zoning is one of the biggest ones, and zoning and local ordinances. Here in Columbus, I like to say the zoning code is fairly silent. It doesn't specifically call out and enable urban farming or even gardening, but it also doesn't prohibit it. But some cities have zoning codes that are very prohibitive and have in their codified in their zoning codes that you cannot grow food in certain zones. We've been working as Julie on the line and Aaron on the line will know for about 7 years now with City Council and Building and Zoning Services department at the City of Columbus to change the zoning code. In that 7 years, we've been able to change just one code and get another workaround for just one more. So it's a very laborious process, and it's a barrier that really does stifle the growth of urban agriculture. Public policy, something that you guys in the John Glenn School will know about, really has not favored not just urban agriculture, but small scale agriculture and even production of fruits, high value fruits and vegetables. Most of our public policy, especially at the federal level through the United States Department of Agriculture, has historically favored commodity crop growers, corn growers, oilseed growers, cotton, peanuts, things like that. Now, I will tell you, in the last 3 farm bills over the last 10 years, we've seen a dramatic shift in much better public policy and programming and funds available for loans and grants to not just urban growers, but small growers and growers of more nutritious foods like fruits and vegetables and value-added products. And we don't have a lot of research on production topics at our land-grant universities. We have great research on how to grow any crop or raise any livestock profitably in a more conventional system. And really this research, has just gotten started in the past few years around urban food system and urban farms. And so question we get a lot is urban agriculture viable? And a lot of my colleagues I work with that work in the more rural and conventional farming areas location, they say to me, Mike, that's really cute the way you work with those urban farmers, but you're not going to feed the world. And I don't think we ever said we were going to feed the world. But a few years ago, a couple of colleagues of mine at our OSU branch in Worcester really wanted to do some research and determine could agriculture be viable in cities. And so what they did is they used GIS data to look at vacant land in the city of Columbus. Truly vacant land, not parks, not schoolyards, not the green around University Circle, but vacant lands. And there was a lot of land in the land bank in Cleveland, during the Great Recession. They also looked at certain flat roofs that would support growing food in Cleveland. And then the second part of their research, they looked at fruit and vegetable purchases in the Cleveland census tracts. You can buy data on purchases of food items, all types of food items, bakery items, meats, dairy, and fruits and vegetables. And so they looked at the fruit and vegetable purchases in the Cleveland census tracts. And they compared those two things, the vacant land and the amount of fruits and vegetables that were purchased in Cleveland. And what they found, their research showed that if you use just 80% of the vacant land in Cleveland to grow food, they found that you could grow 50% of all the fruits and vegetables that were being purchased in Cleveland. Now that's a lot when you think about it. 50% might not sound a lot, but think of all the fruits and vegetables we're not going to grow in Ohio, citrus and avocados and pineapple and all those things. That same land could also grow 25% of all the poultry and eggs that were being purchased in those zip codes and 100% of the honey. Okay, so it was really the first research nationally that showed that agriculture could actually be viable in a very urban environment. So in summary, urban ag is growing in Ohio. It can have positive impacts on the economy, on the environment, on human health, and community as well. So the answer to the question of can American cities feed themselves? Probably not, but we know we can feed families. We know we can feed neighborhood, and we may be able to feed cities certain foodstuffs, as that research showed. There's my email address and our web address that can get you to an urban ag team webpage that we have. And perhaps when we're done with the other presentations, we might have time for some questions. Thanks.
Yes, round of applause. Thank you very much. That was an awesome presentation. And before we move on, I do want to make sure that everyone everyone in the joining us on Zoom is able to fill out this attendance form, because then we can go through and send that out as a handout that we all got here in person. So if you want to go through it and look at that again. So moving on, we've learned a lot about Ohio and urban ag here. So Mr. Larry Rich is joining us from Long Beach, California. If you could give us some insight onto what it's like out there, you know.
All right. Good evening, I guess, for you guys. It's afternoon for me here in Long Beach. And thank you, Joe, for the invitation. Joe had a great strategy to get me involved, which was emailing the city manager directly, who I hadn't heard from for months, but I did get a referral to, hey, can you talk to Joe at OSU? So happy to be here. I am the sustainability coordinator for the city of Long Beach. We created an Office of Sustainability back in 2008. And of course, sustainability covers very many things, but including urban agriculture. And so it's been one of my favorite topics, although as you will hear from me, it's been a struggle to really get it going in Long Beach. But by way of introduction, I'll just take a step back to point out how, most people think of California as being, well, and it is for the most part, a much more recently populated and settled place than places like the East Coast and Ohio. But the city of Los Angeles was actually founded in 1781, which my understanding is, in terms of Ohio history, that's around the same time that people were coming into Ohio after the Revolutionary War. So the Spanish actually created an agricultural colony in Los Angeles in 1781. And up until about 120 years ago, agriculture was the main activity of Los Angeles County. And around 1900, Los Angeles County was the top agricultural producing county, I think, in the United States at the time. And so, of course, now we associate Los Angeles with a lot of other things. It's got 10 million people, the most populous county in the United States. It's completely urbanized and built out. There is no farmland remaining in LA County for the most part, but it has a great potential to be farmland as it once was 100 years ago or 120 years ago, because that started to change 100 years ago when oil production came in, and this happened in Long Beach in particular. Oil production brought industrialization, and it changed all the old farming lots that used to exist everywhere, including in Long Beach. It caused them to redevelop into housing lots, and that agriculture was lost gradually over time. So when I found the situation in 2008, in terms of looking at, how could we recognize and bolster urban agriculture in the city of Long Beach, we, kind of took an inventory of how many community gardens and stuff we have. And so, we built that map. We have about 18 urban ag sites, 15 of which are community gardens, and then additional ones are urban farms and sort of demonstration gardens and teaching gardens. And so we started to build relationships with each one of those to see, how we might be able to help them, stuff like that. One of the things that we did within a couple of years was update our, at the time we called it urban agriculture, but it's a very narrow, we called it the urban agriculture ordinance, but it's actually a very narrow topic of what we updated, which was the rules regulating the keeping of small food producing animals. So basically chickens, goats, and bees, which were generally not allowed in the city. But 6 or 7 years ago, there was a bit of a movement across the United States as chicken keeping became more popular and a thing, and people were trying to do it and finding out that they couldn't really follow the city's rules. So we were able to put an ordinance through that relaxed the chicken keeping rules, relaxed the goat keeping rules, and relaxed the beekeeping rules. So those are on the books now, and people are able to do that without fear of their neighbor complaining. And there's still guidelines that they have to follow, but if they're following those guidelines, they're allowed to have those animals by right. And then more recently, the state of California created a program called the Urban Agriculture Incentive Zone, which is a way for the owners of private vacant land within a city to get a property tax reduction as if it was agricultural land rather than urban land, and using that as an incentive, potentially invite people to do some urban ag activity, whether an urban farm or a community garden. And then the property owner would get a reduction in property tax. And so that was an exciting thing that we got our city to adopt so that we could apply those rules. And in the last 3 years, we've so far only been able to get 2 lots signed up in this way. So it's been a little underwhelming. But consider what we're up against in California and in Long Beach in particular, with a housing crisis, a homelessness crisis, a pretty lack of vacant land as compared to a lot of other cities around the country, particularly, post-industrial cities. But, residential land is at a premium. Most people think that they're going to develop their vacant lots, so they're not willing to enter into a 5-year commitment, which is the minimum requirement of this. And so it's been a struggle, but we've taken this role in the Office of Sustainability of trying to match people up. So we, on our website at longbeachsustainability.com, we have a page on urban agriculture where if you're a prospective farmer or gardener, you can sign up and get on our list. And then if you're an owner that has vacant land that you're ready to let out, you can sign up on our list, and we try to match people up. Recently, so one of the complaints there was a lot of prospective urban farmers they have aspirations, but they don't have startup capital or whatever, right? And so we've recently set aside funding to do a micro grant program to hand out amounts and just $500, $1,000, or $1,500 to assist people to get a garden or a small scale farm going. Most people can't do that on just that amount. So, they need to have some of their own funding as well, but we're trying to roll that out later this year. And then we've been getting as many countries or many cities around the country, various types of recovery money. One batch of it is going to local food and local food security issues, as was mentioned by the previous speaker, in terms of addressing food desert phenomenon and stuff like that. And so we're trying to put together a proposal to create another city position that right now the tentative title is a master gardener for the city. Out here in California, we have a master gardener program that people can get, it's like a continuing education thing where you can become a master gardener. And then there's a community of master gardeners. But in our case, we're trying to have someone who is in charge of all the gardens in the city, or like a coordinator for all those gardens, and then is funded through this recovery money with the goal of establishing new gardens, at least 3 in the areas that are hardest hit by food desert type issues. And then finally, we're also struggling to implement a new organics recycling law in California, where the state of California has passed this rule that no food waste should ever go to a landfill again. And so the state, and particularly in Southern California, where we have this huge population center without a lot of adjacent ag land near it, to be able to manage organics and organics recycling, but that, and having more urban gardens and agriculture will provide a place to conduct more small scale composting, where people that collect their own food waste at home can have a local drop-off point. We're trying to build that up from the grassroots, but at the same time, we're having to do this top-down thing where for the first time in its history, Long Beach is going to have a green bin, but that green bin needs to go to facilities that don't really exist yet, or at least not with the capacity to serve all of the more than 10 million people in the urban region. So that's going to be a big transition, and hopefully that will lead to more interest in support of urban agriculture at the local and city level, so that we can get that closed loop system of food waste going back into growing new food locally, instead of having to be trucked off, an hour to 2 hours away to the areas of California that can accommodate it because of their agricultural land. I hit everything on my notes, maybe. I have some other quick statistics for you. I mentioned those 18 or so community gardens and urban farms. They total about 825 plots in the city. And so that's about 17 plots per 100,000 people. Wait, no, per 10,000 people, I'm sorry. But so that's good compared to a lot of our neighboring cities, but it only equates to 20 acres overall within our city. So it's not a lot of land. But as I said, there's also not a lot of additional vacant land. So it's kind of tough to really grow that. There is, and we need more assistance, the city does, from local nonprofits that are promoting this sort of thing. And there is one in Long Beach called Long Beach Fresh, and it mostly exists as a website and a resource to connect what they call eaters, feeders, and seeders. And so the eaters are the people that want to eat local fresh food. The feeders are the restaurants and the farmers markets and stuff that want to provide that fresh food. And then the seeders are the growers of that fresh food. So they have various working groups that work on local composting issues and just, again, connecting dots and closing loops so that the farmers markets are able to put their excess food waste into a local composting system and stuff like that. Up at the city of Los Angeles, our giant neighbor, there is a food policy council that meets regularly. So, they're really working on making a more robust, local food system in Los Angeles. And so, Long Beach is, trying to follow suit with that there. But there are a total of 88 cities in Los Angeles County. And so everyone has, different rules and are different places. You mentioned not having a winter. We got our first rain today. And so in Southern California, the first day of rain that happens, and this is kind of early in the fall for it, actually, usually doesn't come until December, is actually the first day of spring for us. So our winter, as far as outdoor growing is concerned, is more like spring, because our summer has been without rain for 6 months. We literally get 0 rain for 6 months. And the way that Long Beach and LA supported its agriculture with no rain during the prime summer, growing months, is through irrigation and is through the vast network of springs and artesian water that we once had here. So 100 years ago, all of the agriculture was happening with flowing wells because of this incredible aquifer system, which has, been tapped out. And so, so providing water now, since we get a lot of our water from imports, is one of the challenges now to expanded urban ag. And, we hear more and more about hydroponics and growing food in enclosed shipping containers where most of the water is recycled and stuff like that, which I don't know, that has its place. I'm not a big fan of that. I want to see vacant lots with food growing on them, to visually improve that lot and to, it was mentioned, farming doesn't generate a lot of jobs, but it generates some, and we want to reintroduce the idea of skilled farmers in the urban area to engage our youth and just satisfy the need of restaurants that want to say that they have hyper local food. And if we can grow that and connect people that wouldn't have traditionally worked in that industry to this emerging local food demand, we're hoping that there's a way forward. We did for a moment have a small business called a yard farmer that would farm people's front yards in exchange for the produce, but then also leave them with a box on their front doorstep. And they did this by bicycle years ago, and I was hopeful that that concept would expand. But they got hit on their bicycle, and we haven't. They were injured and recovered, but that kind of ended that bicycle-driven yard farmer concept. So I'm going to try to wrap up here. We're about to get, you may have heard of California's $15 billion climate investment. It's so new that we're waiting for that to play out. But one of the earliest things is $6 million that's coming to Long Beach, in particular for youth employment around climate resilience. And to us, urban agriculture is a big component of that, because the more food we grow in the city, the less food has to be trucked in, from vast distances. And, the more local carbon sequestration, just all of more local resilience and food security and that sort of thing. So I'm just now about to start to scramble to figure out how we can, plant more trees for our urban forest and get more gardens going. So with that, I will stop there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you very much. It's interesting to hear the similarities and differences on the local and state levels between Ohio and California, certainly two very different states. Now I'd like to hand it over to another Columbus local perspective. So Mr. Chuck Pardi, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your position and who you've brought today.
Yeah, my name is Chuck Pardi, and I manage the garden with the City of Columbus Land Redevelopment Division. And I've been doing it for about 2 years. I took over for another gentleman who actually started it from scratch, which was Seth Bream. Some of you people know Seth. He went on to another job within the city. But what I have brought with us is the gardeners themselves. And I think they're the ones that can really glean more information and give us more detail as to what's happening in the urban garden market. But to bore you with some details, the city of Columbus has about 100 parcels that are being farmed. And of those 100 parcels, there's probably about 10% that are large cooperatives that just produce food. And there's 10% of them that are doing the same thing, but on a smaller scale. And then we have probably about 5% of those that are just doing beautification parcels, where they just, put up art pieces and bring people in for a social event. And then the rest, 75% of the other parcels are a combination of growing food, doing some beautification, and et cetera. I think Mike probably hit all of the points that I was going to make. As far as, the urban garden market really brings neighbors together. It really solidifies relationships. It does reduce crime, as Mike mentioned. People talk to each other. They're able to engage and learn how to grow things. And I think what's important is the fact that these people come in with no knowledge of growing anything, and they learn how to grow, and they take it home with them, and they start their own little home garden. One thing Mike didn't mention is the homegrown produce tastes better than the store-bought produce. I think we all can say yay to that. So that's a good thing. The big challenge that we have in the land bank is the garden longevity. We have found that the nonprofits, those that have board of directors, those that have fiscal agents, have a tendency to be able to go longer in their gardening of those parcels, whereas others, like individuals who may have a strong family and friend background and volunteers and people that get together and want to do it, they start off really passionate, but then if the person who started or people who started, if they don't allow the other people to get involved and make decisions, and that one person has to make a move because of a job or health reasons, then it tends to fade a little bit. as far as keeping up with the garden and maintaining it and rejuvenating that passion they had originally. So with that being said, I really want to hand it over to those that do the gardening here in the city. The people that came on board to tell you guys their experiences and what their successes are and their challenges are. I think that would be a good thing. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you. We can just go down the list here and start with Aaron Hopkins. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're at with the urban gardens.
Hey, good afternoon or good evening to everyone. I'm Minister Aaron Hopkins. I'm an urban farmer on the south side of Columbus, Ohio. I farm on 2 city land bank properties. I think we're in our fifth year and fifth year on one of the properties. I'm in the footprint of a big institution on the south side, Nationwide Children's Hospital. We're in their footprint, and so I've lived in this community now for 30 years in the same house, and I've raised my family, and my children have grown up in this community. I've seen this community change, and I think the term that I've grown to learn is gentrification. It's being gentrified, and so there has been a redeveloping of our community where you see developers come in and they are buying up the properties that were blighted. You know, our communities took a big hit in 2008 in the economic downturn, and I believe even Columbus got a big settlement out of them subprime loans that traditionally hit inner city communities and traditionally the underserved communities and working class poor, and what was the middle income families in this community. We had some large corporations that did shut down prior to that downturn, and it took away a lot of those blue collar jobs, and so our community really took a hit. Nationwide Children has really made a commitment and an investment in this community, and so they have good neighbor relationships with some of the civic associations, and so I'm one of the civic presidents of my. I am a civic president of our community, and so we're Southside Community Action Network. I also serve as an area commissioner, Columbus Southside area commissioner, as a religious and social service. And so one thing that our civic really looks to do, and it's all something that we've always done for the. I think they established it in 1990 is when it was established, and it was about neighbors helping neighbors. And so we have that is our motto, but they have 2 houses with hands extended to one another, and they're embracing and providing assistance to one another. And so we've always been known for providing resources. And so probably about a good 10 years ago, you know, our community really was taking a hit because of those economic downturn, and youth violence was, these youth did not have things to do. And we noticed a big disconnect in our community between the seniors in our community that used to garden and farm in their backyard, and those youth that grandma used to have them youth. You're not going nowhere until you go out back and get them chores done in that garden, and turn the garden over for me and pull weeds and do those kind of chores. You know, I kind of grew up with that. And so I don't know that it was in place 10 years ago, but there were people, backyard gardeners, that had started to dwindle. The seniors in our community, they wasn't feeling these young people, and they were not coming outside and being social. And so we wanted a way to get these seniors back out of the house, to get them back engaging with the youth. And so we said, what better way to do it than in the garden? We saw teenage and young mothers in the community that infant mortality was one of the high in the central Ohio areas, was highest in the nation, on the south side and in central Ohio. And I think Linden community may have been higher than that of the south side. But you had a lot of young mothers that at that time they did not get that, know how to cook and to even identify vegetables, healthy green vegetables. And so it really affected the infant mortality rates because they were not eating nutritious and not getting the things that they needed. And so that was our goal when we first started. There was a program that came out of organization at Ohio State. It's called INFACT, and it was called INFACT Buckeye ISA. And it was Kellogg Corporation had funded it and had connected with INFACT and into these communities, that they had a goal of taking these young children, 8-year-old, and providing them with the resources to grow fresh vegetables at home, or they could do it in a community setting. And I believe Ohio State or Nationwide Children's Hospital was doing biometric testing to see the effects of these young folks and eating healthy, and what it even did with them spending time in the garden. And so in our civic, we had that land bank site where we said, well, hey, let them youth grow here. And so Mike Hogan spoke about even the economic benefits. Sometimes people say that they're minimal. And so I saw something, because I remember the mission that they had with that Buckeye ISA was, and so ISA is institutionally supported agriculture, as opposed to a CSA, which is community supported agriculture. And in my community, this community had not known a CSA, let alone talking about spending $500 on a share of produce before the season. But ISA, institutionally supported agriculture, that they had a goal that they were going to take their $40 million budget that they spent on produce at Ohio State, and that they were going to put 39% of that into local markets, to buy from local markets. And they got my attention real quick. And I said, we just need 1%. And so I said, we're going to teach these young folks to grow. And with the assistance of educators and other urban farmers, that we started leveling up, and we're still leveling up in these inner city communities, of teaching them to grow and produce, and then also to eat, and also to cook, and really educating them. But I'm focusing on the entrepreneur. I also heard Mike say that it's not like everybody's going to be a farmer, but you can inspire them in different areas of agriculture. And so I am greatly inspired with aquaculture and aquaponics, hydroponics. I've seen some of the pictures in Detroit where they repurpose those buildings. And I keep telling these young folks, hey, it is some money in there. And the things of science and learning the benefits of a healthy soil, and making sure soil health, and just even hearing the challenges that the gentleman spoke of out in Long Beach, that it didn't rain for 6 months, and so you got to have some science to know how to get your stuff to grow right. And so we expanded because everyone really wanted those healthy vegetables in our community. In my community, it was collard greens. Everybody wanted collard greens. And so they'd have my garden staked out, like, hey, when them greens gonna be ready, bro? And I'm like, we can't, everybody can't get that one little plant of the collard greens. So we expanded and we have 2 acres in Johnstown, Ohio. We do high tunnel farming there. We connected with NRCS. And so we have 2 high tunnels out there that are 90 by 36. We farm on those 2 acres there. This was our first season of growing there. So we also we also connected with some local farmers market, and I'm sure Julialynne will speak to Bronzeville. We did not get to connect with her this year, but we were able to take youth to another market, Whitehall Farmers Market, where the youth got to experience selling what they have grown. And so it was a good experience for them. And so we are currently establishing a farm stand right in our community that can be an aggregation point for the vegetables that they're bringing home from the farm, that we can have cold storage in that a 10 by 20 storage shelter on some commercially owned property, that we can begin to distribute that produce from there. And so Mike brought up a lot of great points, and I failed to mention that I am an urban master farmer, a course that Mike teaches. And so that was a great benefit. And so he shared a lot of good things. And so I'm gonna round that up. Like I said, my goal is economic development in agriculture, that I can start moving some of these young people from a economically depressed community and begin to show them the avenues, that there's other resources in agriculture, including growing shrubs and trees. I wanted to do horticulture when I was in my 20s, and I did landscape, but I know that there is some economic values in growing these shrubs and nursery products. And so I think I've said enough. Chuck Pardi does a great job of being my manager. There has been city funding that has helped us for the past 4 years. We have gotten those grants, whether it's 1,500, 1,200, and it has helped. And so I will stop talking there.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing your perspective on everything there. So up next we have Ed and Destiny Brown. Are they with us? Nope.
Nope.
Nope. Okay, so then we'll move on to Julialynne Walker. She'll finish us out here. So Ms. Walker, if you could tell us a little about yourself and your program that you're involved with, we'd appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Joe. Yes, it is Julialynne Walker, and I know my sign says Bronzeville Growers Market, and I'll very briefly explain that within Bronzeville, the area of the Near East Side where we're based, our theme is healthy living in Bronzeville. And there are 3 ways in which we do that through a model of vertical integration. First is the Bronzeville Agri Academy, which is a 10-week online gardening course. I've offered it 3 times, and it'll be offered again in 22. And then it's open to everybody. There's no fee. People can come when they want, drop out when they want, no problem. Then we have the BUGS, the Bronzeville Urban Growers. And these are families who are want to garden, but for various reasons feel that they cannot garden where they currently reside. I don't believe this, but hold on just a minute, please. Hold on. Well, that was a first for that. I wasn't plugged in, and it just just told me it was going off. Okay. I'm telling you, there's a first for everything. Okay, so the Bronzeville Urban Growers have been funded by grants for 2 years. The first year we had a group of 12, the second group year 10. And these are families, and families are anybody, individual, couple, people with children, grandparents, it didn't matter. All you had to be is somebody who wanted to garden, but felt that they couldn't actually dig where they currently resided. And so we provided 1 to 3 50-gallon bins, soil, plants, seeds, and fertilizer and advice. And so we encouraged them to grow. The first year, some of them moved to the ground. The second year, others decided to stay and extend their container gardening. That's fine. Then finally, what Aaron mentioned was the Bronzeville Growers Market. And this is a farmer's market that has been located for 4 years at the corner of 17th and Mount Vernon. And it is a farmer's market. And we have vendors that come from throughout the county, not just the city, but throughout, well, actually, even from Mansfield. And we have various activities, again, last year in accordance with the state of Ohio guidelines. They opened up a bit more this year in terms of having entertainment and that kind of thing. But, and that's been very successful. None of the properties there that I've discussed so far are actually in the land bank. This year, we did begin to work with one, the Mamie Mac Community Garden, which we're looking at moving into a different form of production through use of a high tunnel. But I want to stop there and actually take your attention to something else. And that is to have you think about what could be the role of civic associations in maintaining community gardens. And as Aaron mentioned, he's active with a civic association. I have been president of the Franklin Park Civic Association for 3 years. And last year I began to think about what was happening with the community gardens in our area. And I thought there were 3 or 4. When we did a survey, we actually found that there were 10 community gardens in the Franklin Park Civic Association area, 7 of which are on community land bank properties. And so we had a meeting and we began to discuss, what were the challenges, what were the barriers, what were the successes, and what could we as a civic association do to help. And what we decided was that from our funds, the membership dues and other monies we had raised, we would at least give mini grants. So all the garden had to do was, fill out a form, tell us what was happening, what their plans were, what they wanted to do, and what they wanted to do with $100 to $200. And then, basically we gave them the money. And so it was a way to incentivize them, get them excited and get them going. Then I don't know if Mike is still on the call. I went to Mike Hogan and said, look, I need some master gardeners because I need somebody who will go around and advise the gardens because I really had the bugs and it was very difficult for me now, to take on 10 additional gardens. And so he went through his list and he came back. He said, what do you mean? You have 3 master gardeners in your community already, which I didn't know. So I went to them and I said, okay, you have service hours, do your service hours here in your community and help to, build those bridges, which they did. I also want to say, and I'm rushing because I know our time's limited, but there may be some questions that we also looked at the role of the land bank in supporting the gardens. And one of them was really having a problem with the developers around them. And they were able to go to the land bank and say, look, we're having this problem. The developers are listening to us. They were basically dumping their refuge, their construction onto the community garden. Fortunately, with a very forceful response from the city, the developer cleared off the refuge and had to actually rehabilitate the land by adding the appropriate soil, grass, and et cetera. And that was only possible through the active intervention of the city because they didn't listen to us, they didn't listen to the gardeners. And so through all this activity now, other people in the community began to take note. And so Franklin Park Civic Association sits within the Near East Side of Columbus and the Near East Side Area Commission footprint. And so other gardens began to take interest. Franklin Park Conservatory began to take interest. And Bill Dawson agreed to co-host the meeting at Franklin Park, to which we invited all of the gardens in the Near East Side so that we could actually begin to look at other ways to facilitate the development of these gardens. And what we did from June through now, October actually, was to each month visit a different garden and have a discussion on what that garden was doing and what their needs were and how we could work together. This week, we're actually in a rush. We're reviewing applications that some of the gardens are making for the grants that are due on the 30th. And so we want to just facilitate the grant process, assist if they need to be beefed up, the additional statistics, whatever, but just to assist where we can. Two of the gardens also came as vendors to the Bronzeville Growers Market, which now is, an extension of that activity. And it was very interesting when we were able to say to the gardens, you can give, well, let me back up. We found that with a lot of gardens, unfortunately, there's a lot of waste. Sometimes the gardens grow, and they grow because they like growing, but they really don't have a plan for the crop once it's produced. And so they're like, oh, well, we'll give it to somebody. And yes, they do give it, but very often there's a glut. And where they're giving it is already receiving it. So we said, look, you're writing a grant for $1,000. Do you understand that the federal definition of a farmer is one who clears $1,000 in sales? So you could actually sell, and again, Mike mentioned that sometimes the Columbus regulations are more passive than not, but there is a regulation somewhere up in there that says that you can sell on site twice a year for up to 4 days. So we said, sell your produce, all right? Generate some funds that you can add to your grant monies or supplement your grant monies or instead of your grant monies, and then still give some produce to the church or the food pantry that you're working with, but think proactively or more strategically about your produce as you plan your growing season. And so we've found now that we're going to stop December and January. We're really going to look and say, all right, now, given what we have, and now we've identified another 7 gardens. So we now know there are at least 17 gardens in the Near East Side area. And I'm not sure how many of those are land bank, but we want to come together as a whole and begin to facilitate, exchange knowledge, information, and be of assistance where we can. So I just urge us to think about, yes, Chuck mentioned that sometimes gardens are challenged because there's one person, but if we have civic associations that are strong and can facilitate, are familiar with some of the rules and regulations, then that may be able to provide a transition or assist in a transition when the person who initiated the garden perhaps departs. So I think that is it in terms of my, one of the things that we talked about and we were going to add is begin to work with the schools that are in our communities. So with Franklin Park, we have an elementary school, the middle school. The elementary school has a garden, the middle school doesn't. And whether or not they have a garden, we still know that with certain teachers through STEM, they're looking at agriculture as part of STEM. Some people are saying STEAM now, and the A is for agriculture instead of arts, but don't get bogged down. And the other part is for the community gardens north of Broad, we have 3 elementary schools, 1 middle school and 1 high school, and 1 private school. And the private school has a garden, the middle school has a garden, but we want to work on developing gardens with the high school and the 3 elementary schools. So that would be an extension. And we think it's also important because people who do not have children, and it's interesting, Aaron mentioned, our experiences growing up. And I remember growing up, everybody was at a PTA meeting. It didn't matter whether or not you had children because schools were a fundamental part of society. And so I think it's important now to use the gardens as a way to get the community back into the schools and an awareness of the roles the schools play and to be able to supplement and strengthen through involvement with garden activities, much as Aaron mentioned. And so that is it for the Franklin Park Civic Association and Healthy Living in Bronzeville.
Well, thank you very much. I think definitely one of the themes for tonight has been, looking at urban agriculture as a holistic approach to strengthen our communities. So that's been amazing to hear from everyone. So being aware of time, I'm not holding you hostage, so feel free to leave if you have to. Are there any questions before we go? I'll make sure to distribute materials here to everyone. We've had some great stuff, so everyone good? So all right, thank you very much everyone for showing up and for all of our speakers. It was a wonderful event. Hopefully we all got something out of this and was able to make some good connections. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
I have a quick question, if
Yes.
any. I was just wondering, if I'm a new OSU student and I would really love to be involved with the community gardening program. One, as a gardener and also as a public policy student, and I'm kind of not sure exactly how to get involved, and I just wondered if you guys had any advice for students.
Oh, Mike has something to say. He's coming back up.
I think most community gardens here in Columbus have some volunteers that come help, and OSU students and other students from other universities and even high schools are usually great volunteers. We also have a new this year community garden at Waterman Farm on campus, and there is a group of students who are wanting to, and we've made that community garden open to any groups that needed garden space. And there's a group of OSU students that want to have their own community garden space there at the Waterman Community Garden. So, if you send me an email, I can get you hooked up with the person doing that. Depending on where your geographic interest is, there are community gardens all over Franklin County. And like I say, most of them have lots of opportunity for engagement with students and community members at large.
And I put my email in the chat, so you can contact me and I'll see what I can do. Because that's, and I didn't mention that, that's another thing that we did was we connected our community gardens with volunteers through BESA, the volunteer group, and the Franklin Park Conservatory. So we were able to provide large numbers of teams of people, as well as individuals to the gardens that they otherwise wouldn't have. But anyone can feel free to contact me for further information about any of it.
And another good resource to kind of connect with Ms. Lauren is we've got some things in place by the city, and it's called the Local Food Action Plan. And they meet once a month. I'm not sure if they're just still virtually or if they are back at the health department, but you should be able to look them up online. But even with food policy, they address a lot around food policy, and a lot of the urban farmers and those that are interested in the farm to school movement of much, Ms. Julialynne was speaking about connecting with schools. And so there's a lot of great resource at that, and that you're also able to connect with these local urban farms.
Yeah, and I would just like to add too that where you live, like Mike was saying, is probably one of the most important areas that you want to look at where the gardens are. And if you find gardens where you're living, go on up and introduce yourself and say, hey, I'd like to get involved. And then that way, whether it's a block, 2 blocks, or a mile away, you have an interest of being able to go there, more frequently than if you have to drive 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Any other questions? Nope. So thank you once again, everyone, for coming out and logging on. And it was a pleasure having you all. So enjoy the rest of this nice, wet, rainy fall week.
Thanks again, Joe.
Yep. Thank you.